The council chamber stretched wider than any building on Earth. Crystal walls rose hundreds of feet high, and thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the floating seats. Some had tentacles, some had wings, and others looked like walking crystals or clouds of gas held together by force fields. They all waited in silence. Dr. Sarah Chun stood at the center of it all, feeling very small. She was the first human to ever stand in this place. Her dark suit looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the alien representatives around her. She touched the translator device behind her ear, making sure it was working properly. Ambassador Telvax floated forward. He was a tall being made of what looked like living metal, his surface reflecting the lights of the chamber in rippling patterns. His voice came through the translator as smooth and confident. "Humanity has impressed us all," Telvax said. The words echoed through the massive space. "In only 200 years since your Industrial Revolution, you have achieved faster-than-light travel, a problem that took the Vrin 3,000 years to solve, a puzzle that the hierarchy spent 5,000 years trying to crack." Sarah felt a surge of pride but kept her face neutral. She had been trained for this moment for 3 years, ever since humanity's first successful FTL test. The United Earth Assembly had chosen her because she was a skilled diplomat and could stay calm under pressure. She would need both skills today. "We offer you something unprecedented," Telvax continued. "Immediate ascension to the Galactic Council. Not as junior members, but as part of the ruling triumvirate. You would join us and the Vrin Collective in governing galactic affairs." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Sarah had studied galactic history enough to know what this meant. No species had ever been offered such a position so quickly. Most species waited 1,000 years in a probationary period, proving themselves worthy. Some never advanced at all. "You would gain access to our technology archives," Telvax said. "Weapons that can crack planets. Engines that fold space like paper. Medical knowledge that could extend your lifespans to thousands of years. Control over sectors rich in resources your scientists have only dreamed of." Sarah's heart pounded. Everything he described could solve humanity's problems. No more energy crises. No more deadly diseases. No more wars over resources. Earth could become a paradise. "Of course, with great power comes great responsibility," Telvax said. His metallic face somehow managed to look pleased. "You must accept the standard mentor rights protocol. It is a tradition as old as the Council itself. Each ascending species must guide a younger civilization, teaching them, protecting them, helping them develop." He gestured, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a planet with blue oceans and green continents. Not Earth, but similar enough to make Sarah's breath catch. "The Kale," Telvax explained. "A developing species on the verge of their industrial age. They would be placed under human custodianship. You would guide their development, manage their resources efficiently, and integrate them into galactic civilization when they are ready." "May I see the mentor rights documentation?" Sarah asked. Her voice sounded steady, which was good because her hands were shaking. Telvax seemed surprised, but he gestured again. A data tablet materialized in front of Sarah, floating at eye level. She began to read, and the translator worked on the alien text, converting it to English in real time. The first page seemed reasonable. "Protect the developing species from outside threats. Provide guidance and education. Help them avoid catastrophic mistakes." Sarah nodded slowly and continued reading. The second page made her pause. Mentor species would control all off-world resources. They would decide which technologies the developing species could access. They would establish education centers, where young members of the developing species would be trained. The third page made her stomach turn. Mentor species could relocate populations for efficient development. They could access any resources needed for the greater good of galactic civilization. They could restructure governments and social systems to prevent instability. Sarah read faster, a lawyer's mind picking out the implications hidden in formal language. The Kale would not be partners or students. They would be subjects. Their civilization would not develop naturally, but would be molded, controlled, and exploited. Every resource on their world would belong to humanity. Every choice about their future would be made in council chambers light years away. She looked up at the assembled aliens. They all watched her with expressions she could not quite read, though the translator tried to provide emotional context. Expectation, confusion at her hesitation, impatience. This is the path every council species has walked, Talvac said. The hierarchy mentored 17 species. The Vrin guided 23. It is how civilization spreads through the galaxy. The strong guide the weak until they too become strong. Sarah thought about the translation. The strong guide the weak. She had heard similar words before in history classes about Earth's colonial era, about empires that claimed to bring civilization while they extracted wealth and crushed cultures, about good intentions that paved roads to suffering. I need to consult with my government, Sarah said carefully. The chamber erupted. Beings rose from their seats, tentacles waving, voices raised in a dozen languages that the translator struggled to handle. Never had a species hesitated when offered ascension. Never had anyone questioned the mentor rights. It was simply how things were done. Telvax raised a hand, and silence fell. You may have one standard cycle, he said. His metallic face showed something that might have been disappointment or anger. But understand, Dr. Chun, that this offer will not come again. Refuse, and humanity will remain on the outer edges of galactic civilization, alone, unprotected, without friends or trading partners. Sarah bowed slightly, a gesture of respect she had practiced. I understand. Thank you for this opportunity. As she left the chamber, walking down the long crystal corridor to her ship, Sarah felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She carried humanity's future in her hands, and whatever choice she brought back to Earth would change everything. The United Earth Assembly Hall was packed. Representatives from every nation sat in the tiered seats, and the gallery was filled with observers, journalists, and protesters. The debate had been going on for 6 hours, and voices were getting louder. This is our chance, Representative Marcus Chun shouted, slamming his hand on his desk. Do you understand what we're turning down? Technology that could cure every disease. Energy systems that could power our world for millennia. We would be protected, powerful, respected. Protected from what? Dr. Sarah Chun asked from the speaker's podium. She was exhausted from the trip back from the council station and from explaining the same points over and over. From the same council that will cut us off if we refuse. This is not protection. This is a protection racket. You're being dramatic, Marcus countered. He was her cousin, which made this argument even harder. Every species in the council went through this process. They all mentored younger civilizations. It's how the system works. Why should we be different? Sarah pulled up a hologram display. Images of the Kale appeared in the air above the assembly floor. They looked almost human, with green-tinted skin and large eyes. The images showed their cities, their art, their families. I met with the research team that has been observing the Kale, Sarah said quietly. They have poets. They have philosophers. They just invented the printing press 50 years ago, and they're in the middle of a cultural renaissance. Their music is beautiful. Their mathematics is elegant. They're on the verge of their own scientific revolution. She changed the image. Now it showed documentation from other mentored species. Cities reorganized into efficient grids. Populations moved to resource extraction sites. Children taken to off-world education centers and returned speaking different languages, thinking different thoughts. The mentor rights protocol would let us take their children, Sarah said. It would let us decide where they live, what they learn, how their society is structured. We would control every resource on their planet. Does this sound like mentoring to you? Or does it sound like something else? It sounds like survival, said Representative Okonkwo from the African Union. She was old and respected, and the assembly quieted when she spoke. I hear your concerns, Dr. Chun, but we must think of our own people. If we refuse the council, we will be alone in a dangerous galaxy. No allies, no trade, no protection from hostile species. There are no hostile species. Sarah shot back. Every threat in this galaxy is controlled by the council. They're not offering us protection from external enemies. They're offering us protection from themselves. The assembly erupted again, voices overlapping. Sarah felt her hope sinking. The pragmatists were winning. She could see it in the faces around her. Fear was a powerful motivator, and Telvax had made the threat clear. Then an old voice cut through the chaos. May I speak? Everyone turned. Kenji Yamamoto stood slowly from his seat in the visitors' gallery. At 104 years old, he was a living link to Earth's past. He had been invited as an observer, a respected elder statesman, but no one expected him to speak. Please, Mr. Yamamoto, the assembly president said. Come forward. Kenji walked slowly to the podium. Sarah stepped aside, and he gripped the sides of the podium with weathered hands. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. My grandparents were from Korea, he said. They lived through the Japanese occupation. My other grandparents were Japanese. They told me what their government said to justify it. That they were bringing civilization. That they were protecting their Asian brothers from Western imperialism. That it was for the greater good. He paused, and the assembly was silent. I was born just after the last World War. I grew up hearing stories from every side. The Germans said they were creating order. The Japanese said they were building a co-prosperity sphere. The Americans said they were spreading freedom, even as they propped up dictators. Everyone had good reasons. Everyone believed they were the heroes of their own story. Kenji looked around the assembly, making eye contact with as many representatives as he could. I am old enough to remember when we almost destroyed ourselves. Nuclear weapons. Climate collapse. We came so close to ending everything. And do you know what saved us? It was not technology. It was not power. It was the moment we looked at ourselves honestly and admitted what we had become. He gestured at the images of the Kale still floating in the air. The council is offering us the chance to be colonizers. They dress it up with nice words like mentor and guide, but read the fine print. We would control these people. We would take their resources. We would reshape their civilization to suit our needs. And we would tell ourselves it was for their own good. Kenji's voice grew stronger. I am old, and I will be dead soon. But I lived through the era when we finally learned our lesson. When we finally understood that you cannot build a good future on the backs of others. That power without honor is just another word for tyranny. He turned to look at Sarah. Dr. Chun is asking us to remember who we are. Not who we could be if we forget everything we learned, but who we are right now at this moment in our history. Are we the species that learn from our mistakes? Or are we the species that will repeat them on a galactic scale? He stepped back from the podium, breathing heavily. Sarah moved to help him, but he waved her off and walked back to his seat on his own. The assembly sat in silence. Then Representative Okonkwo stood. I would like to change my vote, she said. I vote to refuse the council's offer. One by one, others stood. The tide had turned. Not completely, but enough. When the final vote came 2 hours later, The result was 187 to 176. Humanity would refuse ascension. They would reject the mentor rights. They would choose honor over power. Sarah sat in her small office afterward, staring at the wall. They had won the vote, but she felt no joy. She knew what came next. The council would not take this well. Humanity had just made the most powerful entities in the galaxy very angry. Her tablet beeped. A message from Telvax. She opened it with trembling fingers. "Your decision has been noted," it read. "The consequences will be severe. No species defies the natural order without paying a price. You have chosen poorly, Dr. Chan. Your people will remember this as the day humanity doomed itself." Sarah closed the tablet and looked out the window at the earth below. Blue and green and beautiful. She hoped they had made the right choice. She hoped honor would be enough, but deep down, she was afraid. The blockade started 3 days after Sarah delivered humanity's refusal to the council. Massive warships appeared at the edges of every human-controlled system, preventing any ships from entering or leaving. Trade stopped. The flow of resources from the mining colonies to Earth slowed to nothing. 6 months later, the situation was getting desperate. Food rationing had been implemented on Mars colony. The station orbiting Europa was down to 3 months of supplies. On Earth, the economy was struggling as interstellar trade vanished overnight. Sarah watched the protests from her office window. Thousands of people marched through the streets below, carrying signs. "We chose wrong." Some read, "Our children are starving for alien pride." Others proclaimed. She did not blame them. It was hard to feel noble when your stomach was empty. "You should see this," her assistant said, running into the office with a tablet. The screen showed news from the Kale homeworld. The Vrin Collective had been granted mentor rights over the species. The images were hard to watch. Kale cities were being reorganized according to Vrin efficiency standards. The graceful, chaotic architecture that had developed over thousands of years was being torn down and replaced with identical gray blocks. Worse were the videos of Kale children being loaded onto transport ships. The Vrin explained they were being taken to education centers where they would learn proper civilization. The children's parents stood watching, unable to resist the armed Vrin soldiers. Sarah felt sick. This was happening because humanity had refused. The council had made that clear. They had given the Kale to the Vrin as a message, choosing the most ruthless species as mentors. "See what you could have prevented," the message said. "This is your fault." "Turn it off," Sarah whispered, but the images haunted her. That night, she lay awake wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. Maybe Marcus had been right. Maybe pragmatism should have won over principle. Maybe it was selfish to choose honor when the price was paid by others. Then something unexpected happened. Sarah's secure communication terminal blinked with an incoming message. The source was scrambled, bouncing through a dozen relay points to hide its origin. She opened it carefully. "We saw what you did." The message read in awkward English. "We are the Torvak. The hierarchy mentored us 300 years ago. They took our cities, our resources, our children. They said it was for our own good. We believed them because we had no choice. But we never forgot who we were." The message included files, gigabytes of data. Sarah's hands shook as she opened them. They were internal council documents, leaked by someone inside the system. Documents showing the true horror of the Mentor Rights Protocol. Casualty rates. Cultural extinction statistics. Resistance movements crushed. The files went back thousands of years. More messages came over the next weeks. A cargo ship captain from a mentored species who accidentally broke the blockade to deliver food to Mars colony. A junior diplomat who leaked the locations of Rin prison facilities on the Kale homeworld. a group of hackers who crashed the Council's propaganda network for 6 hours, filling it instead with images of human crowds donating food and supplies to help the blockaded colonies. The subjugated species were watching. Humanity's choice had given them something they had not felt in centuries: hope. On Earth, the mood began to shift. Yes, times were hard, but humanity had faced hard times before. They had survived world wars and climate catastrophes. They had pulled together when extinction seemed certain. The blockade was terrible, but it was not the end. Scientists who could not access Council technology were forced to innovate. Without the easy answers, they had to think differently. A team in Mumbai developed a new energy system based on quantum tunneling, something the Council had never explored because they had access to antimatter generators. Engineers in Sao Paulo created a food synthesis system that was less efficient than Council replicators, but could be built with available materials. Humanity was learning to solve its own problems again. It was painful and slow, but every solution was truly theirs. Sarah received a message from Kenji Yamamoto. The old man was in the hospital, his health failing, but he had heard about the protests and the criticism. "Do not doubt yourself," he wrote. "I have lived long enough to know that doing the right thing often feels wrong at first. The path of honor is never the easy path, but it is the only path that lets you look at yourself in the mirror." He died 3 days later, and his funeral was attended by thousands. People who had been protesting in the streets came to pay their respects. Many left the funeral home with a different look in their eyes, no longer angry but determined. A year passed. Then, too, the blockade continued, but humanity adapted. The colonies became more self-sufficient. Earth's economy slowly stabilized around internal trade and production. It was not the glorious future the Council had offered, but it was honest work, and across the galaxy, cracks were forming in the Council's foundation. The Torvak were not alone in their quiet rebellion. A dozen other subjugated species began coordinating through the galactic undernet. Small acts of defiance multiplied. A transport ship full of Kale children was mysteriously rerouted and returned home. A Vrin administrator was found tied up in his office, his computer wiped clean of exploitation records. The Council deployed peacekeeping forces, but they were stretched thin. Rebellions they had easily crushed for millennia were now backed by coordinated resistance. Someone was teaching the subjugated species how to fight back, how to resist efficiently, how to protect themselves. Telvac sent Sarah another message. "You have started something you cannot finish," it read. "The galaxy is descending into chaos because of your idealism. Millions will suffer because you refuse to accept the natural order." Sarah wrote back a simple reply. "The natural order was built on chains. We chose to break them. Whatever comes next will be better than what you created." She did not know if that was true, but she believed it had to be, because the alternative was accepting that power and cruelty were the only paths forward. And humanity had already decided they would not walk that road, even if it meant walking alone. The emergency signal came from the Kale homeworld at 0300 hours. Sarah was pulled from sleep by the blaring alarm on her terminal. She rushed to the command center, still in her sleeping clothes, her heart pounding. "The Vrin are accelerating their timeline," her military advisor explained, pulling up holographic displays. "They're moving to full colonization. They're going to relocate the entire Kale population to labor facilities and strip mine the planet. It happens in 72 hours. Sarah stared at the images. Massive Vrin processing ships were already in orbit. The Kale's beautiful cities would become open-pit mines. Their oceans would be drained for rare minerals. Their forests would be burned for carbon extraction. An entire world would die, and a species would become permanent slaves. "We have to do something," Sarah said. "We can't," the admiral replied. "We have 12 ships capable of making the journey. The Vrin have 60 warships in that system alone. It would be suicide. And even if we tried, the Council would declare it an act of war. We'd be finished. Sarah looked around the command center. Everyone was avoiding her eyes. They knew what she was going to say. They knew it was crazy. But 2 years of resistance had changed humanity. They had learned to do impossible things. Send a message to Captain Rivara, Sarah said quietly. Tell her to prepare the stealth fleet. 6 hours later, 12 human ships dropped out of FDL at the edge of the Kale system. They were not impressive vessels, cobbled together from mining ships and research vessels, modified with the new technologies humanity had developed during the blockade. They had no powerful weapons, no shield generators, no Council technology at all. What they had was quantum tunneling drives that could make micro-jumps, appearing and disappearing in unpredictable patterns. They had communication systems that bounced signals through dimensional static, making them impossible to track. They had been designed by people who could not rely on overwhelming force, and so had learned to be clever instead. Captain Maria Rivera stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching the Vrin fleet on her screens. 60 warships, each one capable of destroying her entire fleet with a single volley. This was madness. This was glorious. Open a channel, she said. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. The communication officer nodded, and Rivara began to speak. This is Captain Maria Rivara of the United Earth Fleet. We are here in defense of the Kale people. The Vrin Collective will cease all colonization operations immediately and withdraw from this system. The response came quickly. A Vrin commander appeared on the screen, his insectoid face twisted in what might have been amusement. You are 12 primitive ships facing the might of the Collective. You have no authority here. Leave now or be destroyed. We told the Council 2 years ago that we would not build our future on the backs of others, Rivera said calmly. We also told them we would not stand by while they did it. Consider this our official intervention. The Vrin fleet opened fire. Particle beams lanced through space where the human ships had been, but they were already gone, micro-jumping to new positions. The human vessels were not attacking, just dodging, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Then something happened that no one expected. Ships began dropping out of FDL all around the system. Not human ships, but vessels from a dozen other species. The Torvak, the Yenari, the Kelter, all the subjugated species that had been quietly rebelling for 2 years. We stand with humanity, came a transmission from a Torvak ship. We stand with the Kale. The age of Council tyranny ends today. The Vrin fleet was suddenly facing not 12 ships, but over 100. Still not enough to win a conventional battle, but these were not conventional vessels. They used tactics the Council had never seen, because they had been invented by species that learned to fight while under oppression. Hit and run attacks, coordinated microjumps, disruption of communication networks. And on the planet below, the Kale people had received a human transmission. They knew someone was fighting for them. Resistance cells that had been forming in secret for months now rose up across the planet. Vrin facilities were sabotaged. Transport ships were grounded. The occupation fell into chaos. Sarah watched from Earth as the reports came in. The battle had not been won, not yet, but something fundamental had changed. The Council's power had always rested on the assumption that no one would fight back, that the subjugated species would stay broken and afraid. That assumption was now shattered. Telvax appeared on her screen, his metallic face showing something she had never seen before, uncertainty. Stop this madness, Dr. Chan. You are tearing apart an order that has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Peace? Sarah replied. You mean submission. You built an empire on chains and called it civilization. Did you really think it would last forever? And what will replace it? Telvax demanded. Chaos? War? Every species fighting for dominance? Maybe, Sarah admitted. Or maybe we'll build something better. Something based on cooperation instead of control. Where species help each other because they choose to, not because they're forced. Where strength means protecting others, not exploiting them. The fighting in the Kale system lasted for 3 more days. The Vryn finally withdrew, unable to maintain control in the face of coordinated resistance. The council ships that came to reinforce them found themselves facing the same hit-and-run tactics. The same impossible-to-track vessels that more subjugated species joined the rebellion. The council deployed fleets to crush the uprisings, but they were spread across 100 worlds, fighting enemies that refused to engage in conventional battles. For 10,000 years, the council had ruled through overwhelming force. They had never learned to fight an insurgency. 1 year later, Sarah stood in a new assembly hall. Not the grand council chamber with its crystal walls, but a simple building on a neutral station. Representatives from 60 species sat in modest chairs, including a Kale delegation led by a poet named Kelvar, who had led the resistance on his homeworld. Telvax was there too. No longer an ambassador, but a representative of a species that had lost its empire. The hierarchy had fallen, along with the Vryn Collective and the other ruling powers. The old order was gone. "We propose a galactic assembly," Sarah said, standing at a podium that put her at the same level as everyone else. Not a council that rules from above, but a forum where every species meets as equals. Where power comes not from control over others, but from the respect you earn and the help you provide. "And who will lead this assembly?" Telvax asked bitterly. "No one," Sarah replied. "That's the point. Every species develops at their own pace, makes their own choices, walks their own path. We help each other when asked, trade as equals, and protect each other from true threats. But no one gets to control anyone else." "Naive," Telvax said. "Idealistic. It will never work." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But we're going to try anyway. Because the alternative is going back to your way, and we've all seen where that leads." The vote was unanimous. Even Telvax, in the end, voted yes. What choice did he have? The old order was finished. 10 years later, Sarah attended a ceremony on the Kale homeworld. Kelvar, now serving as their world's elected leader, presented her with a piece of crystal carved in the shape of their traditional symbol for freedom. 2 hands, unbound, reaching upward. "Your species saved us," Kelvar said through the translator. "Not for power or resources or control, just because it was right." Sarah held the crystal carefully. "We saved ourselves too," she said. "We almost became what we hated most. Thank you for giving us a reason to remember who we wanted to be." That night, she looked up at the alien stars from the Kale homeworld and thought about Kenji Yamamoto. The old man had been right. The path of honor had been painful and difficult and had cost them dearly. But it had led them somewhere worth going. It had led them home.